Welcome to a new edition of the Scout with Bryan podcast. Let's jump around the league a little bit, talk about a few of the moves of the past few days, jump around the entire NBA. Let's get right into it. PJ Tucker to Milwaukee. A lot of people, huge fans of the move. I like the move. I'm not going to go overboard because I do think PJ is really, really aging. I think this is by far his worst year. I mean, people forget that he's 35 years old, turning 36 relatively soon, and he was just bad for the Rockets this season, and it really exposed. I mean, you take James Harden away from him, and his value as a player just goes down exponentially. When he had to play more of a regular NBA role this season for the Rockets, where they stopped kind of using him as a small ball five and put him back as like a 4, occasional 3 even, asked him to kind of just be on the wings a lot, be at the slot a lot, to dribble occasionally, to shoot threes from places other than the corner. Those things he can't really do, doesn't really do well, and he really, really struggled. I do think he'll be rejuvenated. Certainly Houston was a terrible situation this season, and, he was kind of half checked out anyway, at least was more professional than James about it, but clearly was not happy there, was not, really engaged anymore, and, for good reason, as that team is totally fallen apart. But I do think, he'll be better for sure for the Bucks. Most valuable thing he does, he's the enforcer type. He's the guy in a playoff series that can, switch 1 through 5 and lock up the other team's best player for stretches and, be a hugely impactful defender, take big charges, have huge hustle plays, guard the post, switch on to point guards, do a little bit of everything, and then, I think the Bucks will get him back more into his comfort zone offensively, which mostly is just standing in the corners and hitting threes. Obviously they don't have Harden there either, so they're not going to create, to the extent that he did. But, Giannis obviously gets into the paint a ton, forces doubles and lots of help defenders to come in. Middleton obviously is going to get, the occasional front, the occasional trap, and the ball is going to move, and it's going to find, PJ, I think, in the corner more. We'll see if maybe they play him some as kind of a small ball backup 5 to Lopez some. Portis has been pretty good for most of the season. Maybe he plays kind of that backup 4 type spot. But, again, I think definitely a good move for them. I wouldn't go as far to call it a great move because, they did lose DJ Augustine, who, sure, is not much, but pretty much was the only legitimate, real point guard on the roster. Drew obviously plays that role, and Giannis can handle the ball, but they need to find a way to get a point guard. I don't know if, maybe you can get George Hill back there or Isaiah Thomas or, some of the other vets that might become available, but I'm sure they're looking for somebody there. You give a future pick that's probably not going to amount to very much. So, again, I understand it. I think, it does make them better. PJ, if healthy and if in good shape and locked in, one of my favorite players in the league. I've long endorsed him for even Defensive Player of the Year. I think him not being on an all-defensive team almost every season for the last 5 or so is comical and highway robbery that he doesn't get that kind of acknowledgement because that is, the kind of defender he's been and can be, so definitely brings that. And again, we'll see if Milwaukee, again, puts him in the corners, gets him shooting nothing but corner threes and doesn't ask him to do much else offensively and, doesn't, Bud never really overworks anybody minutes-wise. He's not going to be asked to play 30, 35 minutes. He'll play 25 or so, 20 maybe at times. They'll get him well rested and rejuvenated for the playoffs, and expect him to really contribute there. So definitely like the move. Definitely, added bonus of keeping him away from the Heat and the other contenders in the East. But again, they do need a point guard, and PJ, definitely having his worst season, definitely showing his age. But I do think he has a little bit left in the tank and should be valuable for them down the stretch run. Speaking of Miami, they apparently refused to put KZ Okpala in the trade for PJ, so they miss out on PJ, but they do get Trevor Ariza, who's basically been hibernating for the past year. After refusing to come play in the bubble, he gets traded around 17 times and plays on 9 teams in 24 hours, and eventually ends up with the Thunder, who never really, I at least didn't even see it discussed. I mean, I'd assume that he basically just almost refused to go play there, which is odd that nobody really talks about it. I don't know, if they cited some family thing or something, but I don't know. Probably nonsense, more just a case of not wanting to be in Oklahoma City and not wanting to be part of basically a rebuild, which is a shame because, they've showed that they've still been a really competitive team this season, 17-23, above Sacramento, tied with New Orleans, game behind Memphis, or game in the win column at least. So it's like George Hill, like Al Horford have been valuable vets there. I think Trevor could have done that, and not playing basketball for an entire year, that's tough. We see it every day. I try to go out and pick up with the 9th graders I coach, and I can barely even move, having not played basketball in basically a year now, thanks to COVID. In Maryland, you still can't even get on a gym indoors. Thankfully, starting to warm up so you can get outside a little bit and hopefully get some pickup games going. But yeah, still literally not allowed to even shoot around alone inside at LA Fitness. I know it's pretty different in some different states, and some of you guys have said you've been open for a long time and playing pickup for a long time. Maryland, you basically cannot walk inside anywhere, to do anything physical unless you're 20 feet apart from everyone, all wearing masks. But anyway, yeah, so, Trevor's up there in age, too. He, I believe, is also 35, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here. Turns 36 in June. So, with that age, with being out of it for so long, it'd definitely be interesting to see how rusty he is. Didn't play a ton even, the season before, going back and forth, Sacramento and Portland. But, I will say, obviously, he, like PJ, is capable of being a big-time defender. Good body, 6'8", wing that can, guard 1 through 4 at times. Definitely best suited, to be like a wing defender, not really like PJ, not as stocky and strong. So he's better off guarding 3s, stretch 4s. But you can use him on like LeBron's at times. You can use him on Giannis's at times. On Ben Simmons, guys like that. He could, try to hold his own. Really good defensive player, and also has been at times a tremendous shooter in his career. For Houston, 17-18 shoots 37% on 7 a game. 34%, 7 a game the year before, 37%, and 35% his first year there. That was after 2 years with us in D.C., where he shot 36 and then 40% from 3, earned him a huge contract from Houston. And people sometimes look at, 35, 34, that's not that great. It is when you're taking 7 a game. He went from shooting, first 2 a game in New Orleans to almost 4 to almost 6 for us his last season. And then with Houston, he shoots almost 7 a game basically every season. So they had him playing, full Morey ball. Anytime he got a look at the basket from 3, they wanted him getting a shot up. So obviously he's not going to have that kind of freedom in Miami, but we'll see basically if he can maybe replicate that Jay Crowder role from last season. Obviously, Crowder was hugely valuable to their playoff run. I think has been the biggest thing missing that they really lost out on. Letting him go in the offseason. But Trevor does have that kind of skill set again. A switchable, gritty defender. Guy that'll take charges. Pretty high IQ. You definitely don't want him dribbling. He'll sometimes try to do too much, putting the ball down or taking sidestep shots or step backs or whatever. Mostly not good when he starts doing all that. But if Spo again can just basically get him to defend, to spot up and occasional cut off the ball, which he's got good feel for as well. Again, I can definitely see them wanting to mirror that Crowder role and targeting Trevor as a guy who can do that. And I believe he was in Miami anyway, working out. So I'm sure they got to see him, talk to him a little bit. Good guy, good vet. So should definitely be able to help them. But again, it's hasn't played basketball in a year. Obviously I'm sure was playing pickup and working out and training, but there's obviously no way to simulate an actual NBA game, and I'm sure the Heat will slowly ease him back in, minutes-wise, and slowly ramp him up. And, when you do that, there's always, unfortunately, the danger of injury and, things of that nature. So we'll see how that goes, but fan of Trevor's game and definitely understand the thinking in Miami. Myers Leonard, of course, included in that trade just for salary purposes. That was really the only reason the Heat gave him a big contract in the first place, really to use as a future trade piece and also to reward him for being a good teammate last season. Always super enthusiastic on the bench, which is part of the reason why I hope at least he gets another chance in the league. If you didn't listen yet, that was a big theme of my last podcast called Forgiveness. Obviously made a huge mistake using a terrible word on a live stream, but as a Jewish person, I said I just would be unbelievably perplexed if he knew what that word meant and just shouted it out playing Xbox. Like I said, I think he somehow got a very dirty word, and was throwing out cuss words and threw one out that he probably just didn't know exactly what it meant. And obviously now that he does, I do believe him that he genuinely has been pretty distraught over it and is working with the Jewish community in Florida. He won't report to OKC, but I do hope once he repairs that image a little bit, that the cancel culture calms down a little bit and gives him another chance, because I don't believe he should have his life ruined for, using one word that he very well might not have even known what it meant. Obviously he's just a role player. He's a stretch big. He's not super high IQ. Doesn't have a ton left in the tank anyway. But he can still next season help a team. He's still is a valuable locker room guy. It's a good extension of the coaching staff and has a tremendous amount of energy on the bench. And I do hope that if he is genuinely remorseful and repairs that image a little bit, that he can work his way back to the NBA. But we'll see. Speaking of being in the NBA, Brad Stevens, stay in the NBA. He's not going anywhere. You can old takes me all you want. Celtics fans, hysteria is just nuts. They're all right. They're 500. They're not playing well enough yet, but they've had a tremendous amount of injuries. Danny Ainge has not done a good job giving him enough talent and managing that roster, and just some inexcusable, baffling moves on his part. And, Brad's had to manage a team missing their defensive identity, their leader, for a lot of the season, having Kemba, gone a lot of the season and not nearly productive enough when healthy, and trying to piece together a kind of haphazard bench full of, guys that are very inconsistent on a night-to-night basis. But Brad is one of the top 3 to 5 coaches in the league still. He was outstanding last season. He's been outstanding for most of his time in the NBA, and just people are so spoiled now and expect so much. I mean, even at best, this team should maybe have be 22-19 like Miami, something like that. I mean, they are not drastically underperforming the level of talent there right now. They are going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to even, they're not going to beat Brooklyn if they stay in that 7 seed. But, if they get matched up with, they got to work their way up a little bit to at least like a 4 or 5 matchup, But if they're the 6, they play Milwaukee, say, or Philly maybe drops to that in the first round. I mean, that'll be absolutely a competitive series. Brooklyn, I'd say, is the only team they'd have no chance really against. But everybody else, I really do think the East, aside from Brooklyn, who again, I think they're the clear favorite to come out of the East, but I think people make the mistake sometimes of thinking, Milwaukee or Philly, or people have different things in their head. Some people think Milwaukee's the second tier, Philly's the second tier, like right below Brooklyn. To me, it's Brooklyn, and then it's a lot of teams. I think Philly, Milwaukee, Miami, Boston, even Charlotte. I think they all have a chance to be solid competitive playoff teams. Even the Pacers and Toronto, obviously they've got some work to do. They're Toronto's been in a little bit of a free fall, and maybe they blow it up and decide to move on and look towards the future. But obviously you'd expect them to ultimately be in the playoffs, especially if they don't, and then them in Indiana can still absolutely be a threat. But it's hilarious that we're talking about firing Brad Stevens or Brad going to Indiana when, the Pacers and Raptors are at 10-11 seeds. Boston's at the 7 right now, and all the criticisms on Brad Stevens. So as you can see, this Nick Nurse is a damn good coach, and he's 17-23 this season. Nate Bjorkgren, the jury's still out on, but obviously he's had a lot of injuries and missing pieces in Indiana. But they're definitely missing Nate McMillan a little bit, and had an established identity last season that I think they made a big mistake moving on from. But yeah, I think Atlanta, the Knicks, Chicago, I think those teams, they're tier 3. They're the teams that would just be thrilled to be in the playoffs. Probably even happy being in a play-in game. Atlanta playing a lot better under McMillan, obviously, but they also haven't played great competition. But I think he is doing a great job there. Again, doing what he does, which is demand you play defense, slow the pace down a little bit, simplify things, run fewer plays. I've said I think Lloyd Pierce made it a little too complicated at times. So Nate's doing a great job there. Chicago still doesn't know how to win. Unbelievable loss last night. You look at it was like second half, they were up like 20 almost to the Spurs, and it was one of those nights where the Spurs just looked like they were gonna fold it in and didn't have it, and Chicago just takes their foot off the gas and makes 10 million of the same stupid mistakes they've been making for years and years now, and they still just don't understand what it takes to win. Neither do the Wizards. If you had told me through 40 games that they would be below Cleveland in the standings, I would have bought a ticket to Fry Fest, whatever. It's unbelievable how Scott Brooks still has that job. It's just beyond belief. Make sure you check out the Scout The Wiz podcast if you haven't already, too. The other one I have on the Empire Podcast Network, Scout The Wiz, W-I-Z, 3 words for that one. Wizard-specific podcast, but recently had 7-7 George Mirasan on as a special guest. Steve Buckhands, longtime play-by-play announcer for the Wizards, doing a lot of Wizard-specific things, a lot of cool interviews, but a once-weekly podcast over there. So if you enjoy this one, and if you have some tolerance of the Wizards, or are a fan, definitely go over and check that one out. Out west, Utah continues playing great basketball. Phoenix got their vet genius and Chris Paul, so they're in that 2 seed right now at least, but it's tightly packed together. Clippers have been marred by a little inconsistency. Lakers playing phenomenally well for not having AD. LeBron, just ageless wonder. Mike Malone, Terry Stotts, as always, deserve a ton of credit for the jobs they're doing. Michael Porter Jr. playing incredible basketball now. Portland's just kind of become a model of consistency franchise, which is a huge testament to Stotts and to Dame's leadership in particular. Big win, really, for the Spurs last night. I mean, to have them still at 21-16. We'll see what they do exactly with Aldridge, and if they continue to chug along and be in a playoff spot, or if they possibly look to maybe move DeMar and move some more of their vets and really, maybe try to fall out of that playoff picture and look more towards the future. But definitely an impressive season they're having. Dallas has started to right the ship. Big win, obviously, for them last night. Luka playing like an MVP candidate again. The Warriors, game over, 1 game over 500. Very up and down. Steph has his phenomenal shooting nights, and is shooting a high percentage, obviously, and when he's flying off screens, I mean, he's the best shooter in the history of basketball. But you just see again that he's not the kind of singular force that Giannis, that LeBron, that Harden are. And those are guys that. What I mean is just the ball can be in their hands almost all game, and they can make so many plays for their teammates and put so much pressure on the rim and defend and get to the line a million times. And, Steph, when he's not playing alongside the second greatest shooter ever in Clay, it's just, they don't have a great bench. They don't have a great rotation. Draymond obviously is a super utility guy, but is just lost all his confidence shooting and scoring the ball himself. Wiggins is overcast as a number 2 option, although he's been good. It's definitely not a great team around him, but at the same time, you just see why, to me, Steph is not a top 15 whatever player of all time. He's more around that 30, 35 range. Again, best shooter ever. Definitely had some transformative impacts on the game. And is incredibly fun to watch when he's flying around and hitting shots and in his bag and shaking loose for 3 after 3. But I still, there's a part of me that does really believe, you switch him and Dame, let Dame play in that Golden State system for so long, let him play alongside Clay and Draymond and KD for a time, and put Steph in Portland alongside CJ McCollum and that weaker supporting cast that Dame's consistently had. And do we look at them the same way? Do we still look at Steph as this super being? I don't know. I personally don't really think so. And that'll have a whole bunch of Warriors fans angry at me again, and all the stats will come out, and but again, there's something that the people just don't realize in terms of physicality, and just you see even without KD. I mean, yes, he has got Kyrie, he's got a good team around him, but Harden is just killing dudes every single night, and is the offense. The ball's in his hands the entire game. Steph, he handles the ball plenty, but he can't do it the entire game. He's frail. He can't be trapped in pick and rolls 60 times a night. He can't be pressed full court for 30 minutes. These are things that Steve Kerr knows, and I've detailed these things in videos before, and, some people still just don't want to believe it, but there's a reason that they are, now with supposedly quote unquote a superstar, in a acceptable supporting cast, but they're around a 500 team, and that doesn't really surprise me. I thought they'd be a playoff team still, but honestly, looking at the way the Spurs have played, the way Dallas has played, I mean, them being in that 9-10 spot is pretty appropriate, and I think they most likely will finish up. Finish up right around there with Memphis. We'll see, maybe Pelicans, Kings, Thunder, maybe how long they can hang in that race. Obviously, Houston is falling way out of it as the losers of 18 straight. My God, so they were 11-10 and they've lost 18 straight games. That's unbelievable. And obviously Minnesota doing a little better under Finch, but they still stink. So yeah. Prayers up to Sean Bradley. Terrible to hear about his accident that left him paralyzed. Awful news there. Lou Dort needs to fire his agent. Inexcusably signed like a 4-year not near minimum deal, and the Thunder, of course, went ahead and guaranteed those years, because why not? If you could lock up one of the best defenders in the league and a starting piece for a couple more years after this at a near minimum contract, definitely should have bet on himself and only signed for a year or two, and then been a free agent and gotten the bag. But I know, definitely easier to say in hindsight, but screwed up there, because now the Thunder just have tremendous value on his 4-year contract for him. Having a really nice season. Don't sleep on Miami. Again, with Ariza, who, again, might not make a huge impact, but they've been kind of, load managing themselves through this whole season. After obviously a quick turnaround and having a lot of, older bodies and guys that, Dragic and Iguodala and, Olynyk to an extent, Jimmy to an extent, Bam even, guys that just had a tremendous load in last year's deep run and have had to battle injuries this season, battle just getting back into good enough shape, but they're obviously coming on pretty strong. Winners of 8 of their last 10. I still think, like I said, aside from Brooklyn, I think they have as good of a chance as anybody to come out of that East, and I think they're still definitely capable of the kind of playoff run they made and surprised people with last season. Have criticized guys like Cowherd and the hot takes plenty, and maybe Jimmy's not as high as he said, but I definitely understand his point, or whatever claim he made that Jimmy's the best player like all around in the league after LeBron or something right now, I think he said, and that's it's there's merit to it. Like, people that would list Giannis or Steph over him, they don't have a clue. They don't get it. And we saw Jimmy kick Giannis's ass in the playoffs last season, and he absolutely can do that again, because his game is just, even though Giannis, lights the PER up and sets all the advanced stats on fire, his game with his inconsistent jumper is going to struggle in the playoffs, I think, for a considerable amount of time. Until he can really prove he can do that. And Jimmy just obviously is such a seasoned veteran and has so many tricks and knows how to pace himself perfectly and dominate fourth quarters and dominate defensively and get to his spots in the mid-range, get to the free throw line, make his teammates better, do all those things. So definitely, like I said, don't sleep on the Heat, and would not be shocked if they are if they're the ones playing Brooklyn in the conference finals, although obviously right now, we'll see. So anyway, appreciate you guys listening. Make sure, again, follow Scout with Bryan, Twitter, YouTube, and the podcast, the Scout The Wiz podcast as well. And then last but not least, big shout out again to my awesome hundreds of loyal patrons. If you're a fan of my stuff and you're not already on Patreon, again, all it is, you subscribe for a low monthly amount, whatever amount you want, even $1 a month, but the tiers 2, 5, and 10, or you can change and do a custom amount. You can pay monthly, or you can even pay up front. You even get, I believe, like a 5% discount if you pay, let's say you were going to do the $5 for a year, comes to $60. But if you pay up front, it's only $57, I believe. And then on Patreon, you get a whole bunch of perks. You get 50 bonus videos. You get some articles I post from time to time. You get private chats. You get to submit questions for my mailbag. If you $5 or more, you get my bet of the day, which is currently at 49 and 31, almost 62%. So if you bet on basketball, that pretty much pays for itself. It definitely pays for itself. And I'm told all the time I should be charging far more than that, and it's worth far more than that. So definitely remember, you do get that over $5 if you're making good money and kind enough to spare a bit more of this so I can continue to find a workable business model. Again, my model, not like most of the media, is not built on hot takes and clickbait to drive views. It's built on nuance and rational thought, which appeals to fewer people, but a smarter few, and people that have been loyal supporters, again, on patreon.com/ScoutWithBryan. So again, if you bet on basketball, subscribe Patreon, even $5 a month and above, to get that bet of the day. If you can't do that amount now, obviously, like I said, anything is appreciated. You can even pledge $1 a month just to support. You won't get the bet of the day, but you'll still get some of the other bonus perks, and I really appreciate you helping to keep Scout with Bryan afloat. So without further ado, again, check out patreon.com/ScoutWithBryan. It's also pinned on my Twitter. Let me know what kind of content you guys are looking for, what you want to hear more about soon. We'll definitely do a mailbag podcast for this podcast soon. I'm looking for Wizards questions, so if you're a Wizards fan, feel free to DM me a Wizards question for my next Scout the Wiz mailbag podcast on there. And make sure, if you enjoy the podcast, to rate and subscribe and leave a review if you can. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and #talk soon.